Don DeLillo's novel, Falling Man. It's not really a story about the event of 9/11 itself. It's about the world that came after. It's about that psychological dust that settled on everyone long after the physical dust was gone. Okay, let's dive into this.
Right from the get-go, this is where the novel just throws us. DeLillo doesn't give us some big panoramic view of the event. Nope, he drops us right into this sensory chaos, this world that's all stink of fuel fire and fitful cries of disbelief. This isn't history class, it's a raw, visceral human moment.
So this is the question that just haunts every single page of this book. For the characters we're about to meet, September 11th isn't just a date on the calendar. It's the moment that splits their lives into a before and a deeply, deeply uncertain after. So, let's begin exactly where the novel thrusts us, into a world of ash. We're going to emerge from that dust cloud right alongside the survivors, walking out of a world that, in a single instant, just doesn't make any sense anymore. Our protagonist is a guy named Keith, and when we first meet him, he's not a hero, he's not even really a victim. He's just this dazed figure in a suit, completely covered in ash. He's moving, but it's almost automatic, like his body is just acting on some primal instinct that his mind can't even begin to process yet. And in a moment where society itself has completely collapsed, personal history is all you've got left. Keith doesn't think, he just walks. And he's heading toward the home he'd already left, back to a relationship that was already on the rocks, because in that moment of utter chaos, it's the only anchor he has in the world. Keith's arrival brings us to this idea of this survivor's return. It's a reunion that's literally forged in tragedy, which really begs the question, can a relationship that was already broken in peacetime actually be rebuilt in the rubble of a national disaster? Keith comes back physically, but he's emotionally just gone. He can't talk about what happened. Leanne, on the other hand, is completely consumed by it. She needs to understand it, process it, anything to feel safe again. So they're in the same apartment, but they are living in two totally different worlds, both defined by their own trauma.
And you can see how this trauma just filters down to their son, Justin. He becomes this little sentinel, always watching. His childhood fear given a name he can't even quite grasp. His search for Bill Lawton is just this heartbreaking symbol of a whole generation of kids trying to make sense of an adult world that's suddenly filled with this incomprehensible threat.
So, this leads them to try and cope with the chaos. What else can you do? With their old lives totally shattered, each of them begins this desperate search for meaning, for some new way to anchor themselves in this terrifying new reality.
For Keith, finding meaning comes from a mistake. He walked out of the tower with the wrong briefcase. And this object, this briefcase, it becomes his entire focus. It's a tangible piece of the disaster he can actually hold, a mystery he can solve. It gives him a mission when everything else feels completely aimless. Returning that briefcase leads him to its owner, Florence. They end up having a brief affair, but DeLillo makes it crystal clear. This isn't about love or even passion. It's about being with the only other person who can understand without a single word being said. Their shared trauma is the only language they have. It's built on a shared, unspeakable horror. Now, while Keith retreats inward, Leanne becomes obsessed with this very public figure. The Falling Man is this haunting, recurring presence in the city. A guy who stages these silent, shocking reenactments of the tower's most desperate final moments. He's literally forcing people to look at the very thing they want to forget. What really gets to Leanne isn't the horror of the act itself, but the control. His performance is silent, it's deliberate, it's stylized. It's a terrifying moment that's been transformed into art, and that artistic control is the exact opposite of the utter chaos she feels inside. It both fascinates and repels her.
So this really brings us to the core theme of the whole novel, memory. You have Keith, who wants to erase it, but can only find connection with someone else who was there. Then there's Leanne, who works with Alzheimer's patients and is terrified of losing her own mind, her own story. And then you have the artist, whose entire purpose is to be a living, breathing, fallen monument to what must not be forgotten. But just as we start to settle into this landscape of trauma in New York, DeLillo does something incredibly challenging. He forces us to look away from the victims and toward an entirely different and frankly deeply unsettling perspective. He takes us away from New York, and he takes us into the minds of the men who flew the planes. And these sections are meant to be jarring. We follow a young man named Hamad as he gets drawn into this jihadist cell. The point isn't to create sympathy for him, but to explore the machinery of belief and alienation.
DeLillo is forcing us to confront their reality, their own sense of history, and the logic that led them to that day. It's like he's saying that to truly grapple with this event, you have to look at it from every angle, no matter how uncomfortable it is.
Then, the novel jumps forward in time, showing us that the initial shockwave of trauma has these long, lingering aftershocks.
And this timeline really shows the tragic irony of their relationship. The very event that forced them back together is ultimately what drives them apart for good. A reunion that was built on the shock of the moment just couldn't survive the long-term reality of their individual, unspoken traumas.
Keith's final retreat is into a world that makes perfect sense: professional poker. It's a life of odds, tells, pure strategy. In a world that's been defined by chaos, he embraces a system of absolute control and calculated risk. And this isn't just a career change, it's a complete abdication of emotional life. It's a way to be present, but totally checked out.
Eventually, Leanne realizes that the man who walked back into her apartment that day is never truly coming home. She accepts that the safety and connection she craves is something he just can't or won't provide. The gulf between his detachment and her need to connect has become permanent.
And then, in a final, really powerful move, the book just loops back on itself. The very last pages return us to the first moments, with Keith walking out of the tower. It suggests that for him, and for so many others, time isn't linear anymore. They are forever walking out of that tower, trapped in the memory of that long sleep.
So ultimately, Falling Man just leaves us with this enormous question. It doesn't offer any easy answers about healing or closure. Instead, it suggests that some events are so huge, so shattering, that we're destined to just circle them forever, trying to find a language for something that really lies beyond words.